Trader Joe strikes again on night one of the 2024 NFL Draft, and Trader Joe also continues to build a wall in front of Aaron Rodgers as the New York Jets go out and draft Olu Fashanu, left tackle out of Penn State, with the 11th overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. We will break it all down here. And I guess if you want to call it an instant reaction episode to the New York Jets first round pick, this is episode 299 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. The New York Jets night number one is complete. And it was, I guess, action-packed, if you want to call it. We, for the last couple weeks now, have been talking about all the versatility that the New York Jets had, the ability to trade up, the ability to stay put at number 10, or the ability to trade back. And the New York Jets go with the latter. Joe Douglas and company in the front office decide to move back one spot. The Minnesota Vikings jump up to number 10, take J.J. McCarthy, and with the 11th overall pick, the New York Jets take Olu Fashanu, left tackle, offensive tackle out of Penn State. They continue to build a wall. They get much-needed depth behind Tyron Smith, and we went into this draft with three options for the New York Jets. They could have went, well, really two options, playmaker, offensive line, but they could have went three different positions. You either go the tackle route, you either go the wide receiver route, or for the Bauer boys out there who are probably, crippling right now, as Brock Bowers ends up going to the Las Vegas Raiders at 13th overall after the Broncos took Bo Nix. The Jets could have went him, or, of course, they could have went an offensive lineman. And the New York Jets and Joe Douglas go out and bring in Olu Fashanu. And for me, it kind of feels a little bit of like a full circle moment of this entire draft season, because the first mock draft that we did on this podcast back on January 15th of the mock draft season, we took Olu Fashanu at 10th overall. Fast forward a couple months later, here we are, night one, April 25th, night one of the NFL draft, and the New York Jets, one pick later, take Olu Fashanu. So we'll break it all down here in today's episode, what the trade back could mean, how it could affect the Jets moving forward in the rest of this draft. Do the Jets now use some of these assets, use one of their 3 fourth-round picks to move up in round 2, get another top 100 pick, and potentially take your playmaker in the second round as opposed to waiting until the 3rd or 4th round to do so? We'll break that down as to what the New York Jets could potentially do. Now, I'll be honest here. I'll tell you right now, right? I like this pick. I've said it. I've texted probably about 5-6 people about this already. I already posted on Twitter. My preference, my main guy, I wanted a playmaker. I was hoping for Rome Odunze. That's what I was hoping for. I think most Jets fans were. Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., those were like dream scenarios if somehow either those guys fell or if somehow the New York Jets could have worked a way to trade up, which I never really quite saw a trade up being very realistic for the Jets, unless if it was moving up to 8 to jump the Bears to take Odunze. I never really saw moving up to 4 or 5 with either the Cardinals or the Chargers very realistic, because the Jets, they are already not slim on assets, but it always felt like the Jets, if they were going to move up, it was going to maybe only be 1 or 2 spots. It wasn't going to be to move all the way up to number 4 to get the number 1 or number 2 ranked receiver in this draft in a Neighbors or a Marvin Harrison. They would have just needed to hope that maybe some way Odunze gets taken earlier, Neighbors falls, and he falls into their lap, or maybe they trade up, Neighbors is there at 8, whatever the case may be. As the night went on, I was hoping for Odunze. Bears ended up taking Odunze there at 9, which wasn't really much of a surprise. You thought they maybe would have went with an offensive lineman, as they do have Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, but it's a very similar thought process to the New York Jets. They have 2 very good receivers. They wanted another third. They got their 3rd receiver. The Jets have 2 very good receivers. They still need that 3rd. So it's kind of a similar thought process. And then, of course, at number 10, the Jets move back a spot. They could have took Brock Bowers. I know there's a lot of people out there that would have liked that luxury pick, the flashier pick in Brock Bowers, as opposed to the more depth pick in Olu Fashanu, offensive lineman. I guess if you want to call it the more boring pick from that perspective. I wanted a Dunze. He wasn't there. When he wasn't there, I was kind of in the boat of you take a Bowers, you take a Fashanu. I wanted Fashanu in that situation. I would have been okay with a Fautano. I also could have seen the world where the Jets maybe could have traded back again with maybe the Raiders or the Broncos for one of those teams to trade up to be sure that they would be able to take a quarterback and not get a situation where the Raiders fell into, where they had to take Brock Bowers and missed out on 6 quarterbacks who were taken within the top 12, which actually made history in this draft. So I'm okay with this move. I think that's the way to keep it short and sweet. I like this move for the New York Jets. I think it's a good pick. I think it's a safe pick. We went into this draft recognizing 2 things for the New York Jets. They need another playmaker and they needed an offensive lineman. Whether the playmaker came in round 1 and the offensive lineman came in that round or day 2, or the offensive lineman in this situation comes in day 1 and the receiver comes in day 2. Either way, the New York Jets knew what they needed, and they got one of their priorities done. And even though they built up this offensive lineman in free agency, or this offensive line in free agency and via trade with Morgan Moses, all 3 guys they brought in are all very good pieces. You've got Morgan Moses, who's a pro's pro, just battles, good, just hard-nosed player that is well-respected around the locker room, consistent on the field, was very good with the Jets in 2021, had 2 good years with the Ravens in 22 and in last year in 23. You brought in John Simpson, who's young, coming off of his best season, and then you've obviously got Tyron Smith, the future Hall of Famer. All of it's great, but there is some injury history there, right? Morgan Moses has fought through a torn pec of all last season. Tyron Smith hasn't played a full season since 2015. We're almost going on a decade since Tyron Smith has played a full season. So even with all the moves, there's this offensive line. While it would be great to see them healthy, we know how this has gone before. It feels like it's a guarantee there is going to be an injury at some point this season. Even if it's just for 1 or 2 games, there is going to be guys that are in missed time. Tyron Smith is going to probably miss time. There's a 99% chance that happens. If you would be thrilled if you're a Jets fan if you get 13, 14 games out of Tyron Smith. And in those other 3 to 4 games go to Olu Fashanu. But that's why you've got to like this pick if you're a Jets fan, because you trust now if a Tyron Smith or somebody like that goes down, you trust the depth. You're not relying on an unproven, Carter Warren or another Max Mitchell. You're legitimately relying on, in my eyes, the number 2 offensive tackle in this draft, the best pass protector in this draft, and a guy that can easily be your franchise left tackle. Because again, while the Jets solved their needs in free agency at tackle, both right and left, Morgan Moses is on the last year of his contract, and Tyron Smith, it was an incentives-laced 1-year deal. 2025, you're going to be back to square one where you're going to be looking for a tackle. And that was the Jets' thought process, not only trying to help this year, but also looking towards the future of Aaron Rodgers and whoever your next quarterback might be, to have them protected, to have a franchise left tackle, which the Jets haven't had in a minute. They tried in 2020 with Mekhi Becton. It didn't work. I don't want to hear the comparisons to Mekhi Becton. These are 2 completely different players. Fashanu is 10 times better than Becton was coming out of college, and Fashanu doesn't have weight concerns like Becton either. So I don't want to hear, this feels like 2020. No, it does not. Fashanu on the field is 10 times better than Becton, and he also doesn't have the health concern, or not the health concerns, I should say, the weight concerns like Becton had. And I think you got to be happy that Fashanu fell to 11. In my eyes, Fashanu's better than Latham, who Tennessee took at number 7. I think there's some weight concerns there with Latham. I also just didn't think he was a perfect fit for the Jets, considering he played right tackle. If the Jets were going to take a tackle in this draft, I wanted a Fautano. I wanted a Fuaga guy that would be maybe more willing to play left. Of course, Fashanu is just a pure left tackle. Douglas said it tonight that he will play left tackle. That's, I think, something that fits the Jets better. But look, I understand the people that might be a little bummed that they didn't go after the flashy pick. They didn't go after the Bowers. They didn't go out, they didn't get Roma Dunze. Do you want to maybe say, they should have traded up with the Falcons? Falcons took Michael Penix. He would have been there at 10. Do you want to say, oh, maybe they could have did that? Yeah, sure, you could have done that, but that does maybe bum you out a little bit. But I don't think you can be upset with the pick. Do you want to maybe be disappointed they didn't get a Dunze? Sure, but I don't think you should be disappointed in the pick. That's the point I'm trying to make. You should be happy with the pick. If they would have went out and missed out on a Dunze and then maybe went out and taken, I don't know, one of these other lower end tackles that, you really didn't see coming. They took Olu Fashanu. I mean, this was a guy that in many drafts, in my personal rankings, he was the number 2 tackle in this draft. And you got him at number 11. It's a great value pick considering there was 2 offensive linemen that went ahead of him. The consensus number 1 in Joe Alt, and then, of course, number 7, which was J.C. Latham. Well, I think Fashanu is much better than Latham. So I think it's a good value for the Jets here. And they also recoup a 4th-round pick, which might help them for tomorrow. So let's take a look at the trade here. 1st-round pick, of course, the Jets receive. Jets also get a 4th-round pick 129, and they get a 5th-round pick. That is pick 157. For the Vikings, they obviously got the 10th overall pick. That turned into quarterback J.J. McCarthy, and they also got a 6th-round pick 203. So essentially here, Jets, they move back 1 spot. They get a 4th. They get a 5th. Vikings move up 1 spot. They also get a 6th. So when you look at the Jets' updated draft picks here, before we get into what Fashanu brings to the table, X's and O's, some of his numbers, before we get into that, the Jets now, the rest of the way, have 7 draft picks over the next 2 days. You've got a 8th overall pick in round 3 tomorrow. That's 72nd overall. You've then got 111, 129, 134. So 3 4th-round picks. You then have number 157, which is in the 5th round, 185, which is in the 6th round, and then you have 257, which is mystery relevant, in the 7th round. And, of course, the Jets also gave up that 6th-round pick. They also gave up the 1/7 in the Zach Wilson deal. So those are your updated Jets draft picks. You've got those 3 4th-round picks. I think if you're Joe Douglas, after going offensive lineman, not that he puts pressure on himself, but you've now got to go out in day 2, and you've got to bring in a wide receiver. I could understand. Maybe some people would say, oh, still go after interior O-line. I think if you got to trade into the 2nd round, I think now, and try and find a day 2 wide receiver. We'll get into maybe who some of those options could be. At the time I'm recording this right now, we are still in the middle of day 1, so I don't want to give away too many names that the Jets could potentially take, because by the time many of you are watching this, some of those names that I mentioned on here could already be off the board. So I'll try and look at more names that I doubt are going to go in round 1 as opposed to the ones that might end up going here by the time this is all up on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, of course. I'm recording this right now at 10:22 p.m. Eastern. So a little late night instant reaction episode here to this pick. But I could see a world where Douglas, and he kind of hinted a little bit in his post-draft press conference, who, by the way, I will say this, they did not show much energy. I'm not going to read into that much, but Saleh was kind of just staring into space, and Douglas is very low energy. They didn't seem very excited. I don't know if it's because they didn't get an edge rusher this year. I don't know, but maybe they were upset they missed out on a Dunes. I don't know. Look, I'm not upset with the pick. I like the pick. I know there's some people out there that don't love the pick. But this is gonna be one of those picks again. It's not gonna get style points, but this is a pick week 5, week 6 this season, where if the Jets are playing well and Tyron Smith maybe falls, goes down, he might miss, and we get the update that he's out 3 to 4 weeks, and you're gonna look back on this night and say, man, I am glad we took Fashanu, because then you could just plug Fashanu right in. And now when you look more into what Fashanu brings to the table, we've talked about him ad nauseum, it feels like, during this process, but he's 6'6", 312 pounds, 21 years old. He'll be behind this veteran offensive line, which is great. And I'll just start with that. He'll probably, he'll sit a good portion of this season. Hopefully he doesn't play hopefully if he doesn't play a whole lot this year, that means that Tyron Smith is healthy and playing well. But again, you can almost guarantee he will probably be in there at least 2 games, at least 2-3 games. Maybe Tyron Smith stays healthy this season and plays 15 games. Maybe he plays all 17, which would be great. But it's good to have that safety blanket. And this will be great for Fashanu because he's going to be able to sit. He's going to be able to learn. He does have some things in his game to work at, but he's going to be able to do it behind Tyron Smith. He's going to be able to learn how to become a complete franchise left tackle behind one of the best players to ever do it. Behind, really, you can make the argument, the best left tackle in football over the last decade. So it's just a great landing spot for Fashanu. This is a huge win for Fashanu. It's a perfect landing spot, sitting behind this veteran offensive line, getting the opportunity to sit behind Tyron Smith, pick his brain, watch one of the best do it, a future Hall of Famer do it. There's a lot to like for Fashanu from that perspective. That all, again, can set up the Jets for 2024, 2025, and beyond to hopefully capitalize and this guy be your left tackle of the future. He's a monster in pass blocking. I mean, a monster. He's the best in this draft. I think he's better at all. Alt's overall better because Alt's better in the run game. Fashanu does have to work a little bit in the run game. But when you talk about just pass protection, Fashanu is the best in this class. And it's really not much of a debate. He allowed just there's a couple different reports that have come out. According to PFF, it shows that he never allowed a sack in his entire collegiate career. Now, if you look at next gen stats, it showed he had allowed one sack. But either way, we'll go with PFF because they do a lot of great draft coverage. Here we go. 1,258 career pass block snaps. Fashanu did not allow one sack, 0 sacks, and he allowed just one quarterback hit. He allowed a pressure rate of 1.1% in his Penn State career. He suffered a blown block rate at the third lowest rate in the FBS since 2021. Minimum 1,000 snaps. This is a guy that was one of the best offensive linemen in college football, not only last season, but previously in his collegiate career. He took home the honor of Big Ten Offensive Lineman of the Year last year. He was also first team All Big Ten. Let's read you that number one more time. 1,258 career snaps. He did not allow a sack. He allowed one quarterback hit. When people tell you this guy is the best pass protector in the draft, we're not lying. He is. And that's why he was number 2 on my big board, and I think many other people's big boards. Something else you got to really like about him, he's very athletic. While his strength isn't run blocking, he does have a decent, solid ability to get downhill, get to the secondary, which is a common theme for this offensive line. This offensive line has a couple guys with the athleticism, the ability to travel, the ability to get downhill, which is obviously something that you like and you would like to have in an offensive line, which the New York Jets have here. But the pass protection is, of course, the strength, which is ultimately the biggest factor. The biggest factor to this all is the pass protection. And, you know, from what they went through last year to get Rodgers 2 solidified guys on the blind side, Tyron Smith, and if he goes down, you've got Fashanu. Like, you have 2 guys that you can fully rely on. And that's what the safety blanket. And again, I think this is a pick where even myself, I'll openly admit it, I wanted a playmaker. I really wanted a Dunze. I was bummed when the Bears took Rome Dunze. I was bummed. I was upset. I wanted a Dunze, just a stud, whatever. But now that you've kind of let this pick sink in a little bit, this is going to be a pick that I don't think people might not love right now. But again, as I mentioned about 5-6 minutes ago, this is going to be a pick that Jets fans are going to love when middle of the season, offensive line a little banged up, he can step in and he can dominate. Finished last year with a 78.8 PFF grade, 12 games played. Did deal with some injuries early in his career, but played fully last year. 721 snaps, all at left tackle. A strictly left tackle. Never played another snap in any position in his collegiate career. So you're getting a full-on left tackle, blindside, future, hopefully, Olu Fashanu. Welcome to New York. Now, as I mentioned, you look at, the way that this season, or you look at the way that the rest of this draft could play out. Again, the Jets have the 3 4th-round picks. We won't spend a ton of time on this because at the time I'm recording this, we have just hit the 20s for the NFL draft. So there is guys that I might mention here that might get taken by the time night is done. So I'll mention some more of these underrated guys, the Matt, the the Lad McConkneys, the Xavier, the Xavier Leggett or Legit. Those are probably guys that are borderline day 1, early day 2. So I doubt they would fall to the Jets, guys that might go later on tonight. But more day 2 guys that I would really be interested and intrigued. Jalen Polk's a guy that I love in day 2. I think he's earlier day 2. If the Jets can find a way to trade up and get him, I would love Jalen Polk. Jalen McMillan's another guy. We've talked about Brennan Rice, Roman Wilson, Javon Baker, Devontae Walker, Malachi Corey. Ricky Pearsall might be one of my favorite receivers in this entire draft. I love Ricky Pearsall. I think he is arguably a first-round talent. I love what Ricky Pearsall. If the Jets get Ricky Pearsall, he's probably my number 1. Like, out of all the receivers, he's probably my number 1 that the Jets could get on day 2. Unless, of course, one of these guys that are first round, like, might go in the first round, unless if they, of course, fall, then that would be obviously 1. But in terms of, like, for sure, most likely going day 2, top of my list would probably be Ricky Pearsall. I don't know how far he'll drop. Him and Roman Wilson are 2 guys I really like. Of course, Johnny Wilson's a very intriguing prospect. When you get down deeper, this is more like 3rd round. If the Jets don't move up into the 2nd round, you're probably looking more at like the Malik Washingtons, the Jamari Thrashes, the Jermaine Burtons of the world, even Luke McCaffrey. I would prefer the Polks, the Pearsalls, the Rices, the Wilsons, the Bakers, the Walkers, the McMillans, those of the world. Maybe Xavier Worthy. I think Worthy would be a great value pick if you can get him day 2. So it'll be interesting, but I think Douglas will be working the phones. I really have a strong feeling that the Jets will move back into the 2nd round and recoup another top 100 pick to get into tomorrow, to get into the 2nd round after not taking a playmaker and finding, hopefully, that 3rd playmaker, that 3rd receiver in this 2nd round of this draft class. But the Jets start up at the beginning of this all. Again, it was kind of full circle. Beginning of this all, first mock draft we did of the season, I said Olu Fashanu. We mocked Olu Fashanu to the Jets. That was January 15th, just a couple days after the New York Jets season came to a close. It might have been the day after or the week later. We said Olu Fashanu. Beginning of the offseason, it was all offensive line, dead set on offensive line. And then the Jets went out and brought in 3 offensive linemen, and it was still like, okay, you can go offensive line, or you can go receiver, or you can go tight end. What will the Jets do? And here we are. They still end up going offensive line. So I guess all along it was fully offensive line. And there was actually a report that came out from Connor Hughes that supposedly the Jets were never really considering Brock Bowers. Supposedly all of it was smokescreen. I don't know how true that was. They did ask Joe Douglas about it. He gave his typical, we looked into it. Of course, he was a prospect we had on our board. We liked, of course, but I don't know how true that was. The whole Bowers, boys, all that stuff was kind of weird to begin with. It felt like a portion of the fan base, you either loved him or you either hated him. I never really picked a side because I kind of just enjoyed watching people battle it out. Look, at the end of the day, everybody will always find a way to talk themselves into liking the draft pick, whether they don't like, I'm sure the people that don't like this Fashanu pick, will tomorrow, after seeing some of his stats, after watching highlights, will love it. It's how it happens every single year. Because again, if they're wearing the green and white, if they're in the Jet uniform, you're going to root for them no matter what. But take offensive lineman. It's a safe pick. It's a pick that helps you now and in the future. And now we wait and see, most likely playmaker, hopefully round 2 of day 2 tomorrow. Hopefully we get a nice early round 2 pick tomorrow if the Jets can work themselves into round 2 with one of those 3 of those 4th round picks. So hit me up on Twitter and leave a comment in the comment section down below. For those of you watching on YouTube, what are your thoughts on this draft pick? What are your thoughts on Fashanu? Like it? Don't like it? Love it? What are your thoughts? I want to hear what you think of this move. And what else do you think Joe Douglas and this front office have in store for the rest of the draft? We'll be here, of course, discussing every single pick. So stay tuned. A lot more content coming your way. As always, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you soon. Go Jets.